Well, Daniel, you and I are finally back from PAX West 2023. Hopefully we're both pretty fully rested by this point and kind of caught up on our sleep and our stamina and everything. And we are here to talk about one of the coolest games we got to play at the show, which of course is Mina the Hollower. And what's even cooler about this is even though I got to preview it myself at PAX East 2023, you and I got kind of exclusive access to a brand new area of the game. We got to play a brand new demo, and yeah, I think we're here to talk about it and talk about some of the new stuff we saw. And first of all, was this your first time playing Mina?
I actually played it last year at PAX. That was the first time I remember being able to play it at all. I think we played that together at some point, or at least one after another.
It must have
been.
Okay.
Maybe I was with somebody at that point. There was so much happening during PAX last year. It's all a blur now.
I hear you.
This was the second time I got a chance to play Mina the Hollower, and a new area this time as well. So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, and this new area was wild. So for anyone who's been following Mina, it's very kind of horror themed, a little Castlevania-esque, very a lot of macabre imagery and such. And this new area did not disappoint on that front because it was very much like the first part was like a graveyard-esque area, from what I remember correctly. But the part that stands out to me, and I'm guessing you as well, is at some point you just go into this giant creature's mouth, very much like Jabu Jabu's belly in Ocarina of Time. And everything in there is pulsating and gross and lots of guts, and it's 8-bit of course, so it's not super stomach churning, but it's just very gross and fun. And I think one of the areas in that dungeon, whatever it was called Digestion Road. That stood out to me. So that tells you exactly about the kind of area we're playing. And so I know I got to play most of the time, and then you came in kind of toward the end and played a little bit yourself. So the available weapons were the same three that were available in the previous demo we played. It was the Night Star, which is the standard whip that she has, Whisper and Vesper, which are the dual daggers that you get access to, and then the Warhammer. I know that's not the actual name. I can't remember the name of the Warhammer, but it was a giant, heavy, slow-paced weapon, and that's the one you used. I stuck with Whisper and Vesper because I like light, agile weapons, and that they do less damage, but they're fast. You can stick and move. But I want to get your thoughts because I didn't use the Warhammer much. I'm not very good with slow, heavy, high-powered weapons generally, and so how did you find playing Mina using primarily the Warhammer weapon?
Yeah, honestly, I'm someone that also uses quick, agile weapons as well. It's a sword or a dagger on the depending on what your repertoire of available weapons are. But I did want to try more weapons just to get a more diverse feel for the game, so I did try the hammer. It is indeed big and slow, and I feel like you have to kind of get used to the game a little bit more with the agile weapons because you have to kind of match your speed with these enemies that can also be very quick and agile.
Oh, yeah.
And once you learn that timing, once you understand where your placement should be and all that, I think the hammer is actually really effective because you can charge it for a moment and slam down. It does like ×3 the amount of damage, I believe. So you're able to take care of some enemies a lot quicker. But it did take some getting used to. There was like this one enemy I fought where when you attack it, it bounces back and forth. I know you fought that as well.
Yes.
And finding the rhythm for hitting that, because it'll hit you if you're not moving out the way. Finding that rhythm is a lot easier with a dagger than it is with a charging weapon like the hammer. And I think once you get used to that, it's definitely a lot more effective. But it's just a matter of that learning curve. But it's interesting to have that kind of flexibility in your fighting style, so you can like find something that you want. Because I know some people that definitely would go for Warhammer all power first, and then others that definitely would prefer like the speed and agility that the daggers provide.
Right, and I think that one of the reasons I prefer those the speed and agility that you get with Whisper and Vesper is because those enemies hit hard and they are on you like white on rice. They do not let up, and this is something I mentioned before, but obviously one of the clear inspirations for Mina is Link's Awakening, and there's a lot there that you can see from Link's Awakening's DNA, mainly visually, but also in terms of the way her jumping works, for example. Very similar to the Rock's Feather in Link's Awakening. However, do not go into this game expecting Link's Awakening levels of difficulty. This is a hard game, right?
Yeah, like I remember I had difficulty with the original demo,
Yeah.
but this one here, because you were doing the starting area, even that was a step up from what we were used to in the last demo, wasn't it?
It really was. I mean, we had a whole hour to play, and I played probably the first 40 minutes, and you played the last 20. And I didn't even get through the demo area. Now, to be fair, we were told that the point of this demo was not to actually get through the whole area to get to the boss like the first demo was. And I was able to get to the boss and beat the boss in the first demo. This time, it was a much longer area. You know, we were told, don't feel bad if you don't get to the boss. You're not really supposed to. You're not underperforming. Don't worry. But I died multiple times. I think you did as well. But I certainly have no qualms about admitting I was getting my ass handed to me. This is a hard game, and like enemies do a lot of damage, and Mina doesn't really have a lot of iframes. So if you don't take care of enemies, they can very easily gang up on you and overwhelm you, and you'll be, sent back to the last checkpoint before you can even blink. Now, fortunately, in this new demo, we got to try out some relics, and that was I believe there were no relics in the first demo, or there were less relics. And we got to try out a few new ones. I personally went for the ones that increased Mina's defense, I think, by 1 point, maybe 2, and the one that lets her dig for longer, so you can, avoid enemies a little bit longer. You can, get to secret areas more easily. And so there are definitely ways to mitigate the difficulty, so there is accessibility in that sense. I don't know if there are going to be any actual difficulty settings or other ways to tweak the difficulty so that it's super easy. But from what we were told, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what we were told, that Yacht Club's goal with this game, much like with Shovel Knight, is to teach the player how to get better at it, not through frustration and not through banging your head against the wall, but by teaching you through gameplay how to overcome some of these really challenging aspects of the game, right?
Yeah, I think it's very smart in how they're approaching. I mean, the game isn't like, it's not super hard. I mean, we're fairly seasoned gamers out here. We've been around our 2D platformers and our 3D, like these games like Link's Awakening and
Right.
such. So we're able to kind of get used to it as we go along. It's definitely not the kind of game that would be, your first introduction to someone's video game or something, because it's quite difficult once you get further on. And I'm sure it's going to increase in difficulty as we continue forward. But it is that kind of fairly hard, like as in like it's fair, but it's also difficult kind of difficulty where it does teach you as you go along. There's not anything that it jumps out and it just kills you right away. Although maybe here and there, but you kind of learn as you go along. It's that kind of game where when you reach a checkpoint, you'll get a little further each time. You'll kind of learn the way it goes and take that knowledge that you have and apply it to other scenarios as you continue onward.
Right, exactly. So again, look to a game like Shovel Knight where the gameplay is very emergent and you just kind of get better at the game as you go. And there are ways, at least in Shovel Knight, there are ways to make the game as easy or as hard as you want to through the, in my opinion, kind of brilliant checkpoint system where you can use all the checkpoints in the level if you want, and there are a lot of them, or you can break the checkpoints for more loot, but if you die, then those checkpoints don't work, so you have to get sent all the way back to the last checkpoint you didn't break, or alternatively, all the way back to the beginning of the level. So, thankfully, there are fairly liberal checkpoints in Mina as well. There are little, like little dirt holes she can burrow into that serve as like sanctuaries where she automatically heals all of her health, can switch out her relics, can switch out her weapons, and I found those to be fairly liberally placed. Did you as well?
Yeah, I think there were space up. Well, I mean, I was observing you for most of the time,
True.
so I think the amount of time between those was fairly evenly balanced.
Yeah.
There were some where it felt like you had to go back quite a ways, I think. But, I mean, that's just a part of learning the mechanics. And you also can unlock some shortcuts as you go along as well, so it doesn't make it every trek back to be an absolute slog.
Exactly. Yeah, there were I agree, there were a couple of times where I was sitting back a fair bit, but it never really got frustrating. Like that's kind of what we were being told during our demo, is that they're going out of their way to make a game that is definitely difficult and requires you to learn how to play it, but not in a frustrating way. And like I said, I died quite a few times, and I had to retread some ground, but I was having a good time the whole time, and I didn't really ever feel that frustrated or like it was a slog or I'm like, ugh. I'm getting sick of this. I just kind of wanted to keep playing and get better and see more of the game. And I think that's a really good sign of things to come for Mina. Of course, this is still just a preview. We're still playing an earlier build. We were told that what we played, excuse me, we were told that what we played is from a very close to final version of the game. So what we played is probably going to be pretty similar to the game itself when it comes out. But yeah, I'm really feeling pretty good. Now, I remember that you had some feedback for Yacht Club as you were playing the demo, and I'd like to dig into that a little bit because I know we both had a great time. I think we're both feeling pretty positive about it, but you specifically had some feedback that I'd like you to share for our audience. Like, what were you kind of feeling about some of the mechanics that you gave feedback to the developers for?
Oh yeah, we were talking, and then because it's not a final build, we're not sure if it's something that even they were telling us like this isn't something that they're not sure if it's just because it's not there yet, it's not implemented, or that they're going to get back to it later. But I remember there were particularly some of the enemies we were making comments on. There was this one enemy that I think as it moves along the ground, it uses a drill to move along the ground.
Yes.
And Mina cannot dig in that path because obviously you're underground, and so that drill's gonna damage her if you're underneath that area. But I remember I had just mentioned to them that there's no actual feedback that that's what happens. Like there was no sound effect.
Right.
There was something about it that didn't really like make me think, oh, that's something that's dangerous. Even though in hindsight it obviously would be because you're underground under a drill. So things like that, like maybe they'll add a sound effect for that. Maybe there'll be some other ways of feedback because they do mention a lot of things as well. Like there was another part where when particles pop up, that's like an area where, gosh, I forgot exactly what that had indicated.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, like very specific minor things. Like for a game that's like this, where you're a bit limited in what visual representation and feedback you can give because of the art style. It's like, you know, fairly 8-bit for most of the part.
Right.
It's always important to be able to give that feedback to the player, and I appreciate that they were open to listening to that sort of thing because it's still in development. And sometimes with art, you need a fresh pair of eyes to look at something and have someone else tell you that to point something out like that. So I understand for that fully.
Absolutely. I mean that goes true for I think a lot of things. I mean, you know, me, I'm a copy editor, and you always should have more than one copy editor look at something because again, fresh eyes, and that also goes for an art style in a game, and especially like we said, one with as kind of lo-fi visuals as Mina. But when I say lo-fi, that's not a bad thing. I love the look of this game. It is obviously very intentionally Link's Awakening Game Boy-esque styled, but it looks great. The Mina's sprite, all the sprites really, are so charming and expressive, especially for their limited size. The NPCs that you can find in hidden areas all have that Yacht Club charm to them. The writing, too, is just as cheeky and fun and clever as in Shovel Knight as well. Did you kind of notice that, too?
Yeah, I noticed especially when you acquired something, was it a weapon? That there's an actual cut-in for Mina that they show.
Yes.
I don't think we saw it in the previous demo, and I thought that was really cool to have that kind of visual flair, because like even though it's based on that kind of Game Boy style, you're still allowed to give like that visual flair that you otherwise would probably not see back then in the day.
Yeah,
and I appreciate them going for that. It's really interesting. I didn't mention this at all until now, but watching you play on that, it felt weirdly reminiscent of like watching friends play Super Mario Brothers 3 or something. Partially because of the art style, but also because like you watch someone go through a stage and you kind of see them where they mess up, but then they go back and then they get a little further the next time. And I was like, it was a weirdly nostalgic moment at that time, even though we're
cool.
like doing a we're obviously doing an appointment, but I had those kind of flashbacks just partly because of that visual style and just, huddle around watching someone play a game. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I also enjoyed watching you play and kind of our different approaches to tackling the different challenges, especially the enemies, because again, I use the daggers and you use the slow, heavy, powerful hammer, and so our approaches to enemies had to be completely different. Another thing with the daggers is that you can charge, I think you can charge all the weapons, but with the daggers, when you charge it, you throw one. So you have kind of a built-in long-distance attack, but you also have to go pick up the dagger. It doesn't just come back to you. If you miss, you're stuck with one dagger until you go pick it up, yeah. And if you throw it off screen, it's gone until you go to the next screen. So you have to be really careful with it and very methodical, and you also, what I noticed, you really have to use your sub weapons.
Right.
This is not a game, at least in its current iteration. This is not a game that you can brute force. You can't just brute force your way through enemies, and you can't really ignore enemies either. I tried to do that a few times because some enemies are really hard, and they just don't leave you alone. If you leave them alone, they will not return the favor. They will follow you, and they will make sure you pay for it.
Yeah,
right?
I very specifically remember the two that we were with. They were saying deal with your problems one at a time, and as they come along, and that's really something that is very true here. Because if you let your problems pile up, they're all going to come at you at the same time and pile on. So yeah, as you find enemies, make sure you take care of them as you see them. As methodically as you can, because that might cause a problem further down the line, and even in just one screen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing that at least I can think of that I want to touch on, well, two more things. So one of them is how much I still love the digging mechanic. So I mentioned earlier how Mina's jump is very much like the Rock's Feather, and that's true. It feels very similar in its weight and the physics and like how high she goes. But that jump happens after she digs into the ground. She has a burrowing ability that you can use to get around certain enemy attacks, that you can use to find hidden areas. And by the way, there are so many hidden areas, and they are really well tucked away too. This is one of those games that is going to really reward players who are willing to poke and prod and check every nook and cranny and really test what they can do, because there are a lot of secrets here that are very easily missed. I know I missed a few, and there were a couple pointed out to me because the developers wanted us to see kind of an example of how well these areas are hidden. But going back to the burrowing ability, I love the way it feels, and the relic I used again let me burrow for longer, so it made it an even more powerful mechanic. And I just love how how this game combines the mechanics of burrowing and jumping into one smooth action.
Yeah, that's always so satisfying to be able to like jump, burrow, come out, attack, and you can attack out of your jump as well. Like I remember there was some enemies throwing things at you that you were able to deflect their projectiles because you could jump and do that. So it's super versatile, and I appreciate being able to let the player experiment with how they can with all these mechanics in place with your sub weapon, your main weapon, your innate abilities to jump and dig. It's all coming together very nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least the one last thing I will mention, of course, everyone knows that I have to mention this. One of my favorite parts about the demo is that actually this one, like I said, it was exclusive. It wasn't on the show floor. We were specifically invited to one of the hotel rooms around the show to play, and privately in this specific appointment in this hotel room. So we got to hear the music for the first time, which of course is important in any retro style game because you got an amazing chiptune going on. And for those unaware, this is being composed by Jake Vert Kaufman, the same guy who did Shovel Knight, a bunch of the Shantae games.
Yeah.
So you're getting a great pedigree here. And man, I was humming that tune from the area we were playing. I was humming that tune for hours after we left that appointment, and the music seems like it's going to be awesome, doesn't it?
I very much appreciate that we were in a nice quiet place where I could hear all the sound effects. I can't say that for many shows when I go to a convention like PAX, so very much appreciated. But yeah, it's sounding so good. It looks so good. Everything's working out so well. Mouse game good. Who would have been? Yako's making another banger. Who would have thought?
I know, and obviously they're really taking their time. I believe Mina was first announced at the beginning of 2022, if I remember correctly. And Yacht Club are definitely known for taking as long as they need to get it right, and they're doing that here with Mina. They still would not commit to a 2024 release date. I personally think it's going to be this year, but I did ask, and they wouldn't quite commit. They're like, we haven't said anything. It'll be done when it's done. And you know what? I respect that. Cool. Take as long as you need because they have something really special cooking here, like they did with Shovel Knight, and I would rather them get it right than rush it out the door.
Yeah, I am ready for this game whenever they decide to take it out of the oven, but let it cook for as long as it needs to, because we're in no shortage of other games to play, so they can take as long as they want to. We'll be there when it's ready.
Right. And by the way, I said this year, I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't even know what time is anymore. I should say they wouldn't commit to a 2024 release date, but I do think it's going to be 2024. I don't think it's going to be this year. Again,
okay.
what even is time anymore? I don't even get it. Yeah,
like-
so I do think it's going to stick to 2024. I know, I had a brain fart, but, well, with that said, because I'm having brain farts, it's probably a good time to wrap up. Is there anything else you would like to mention before we head out?
Gosh, I'm just as a total Zelda fan, I'm just a big fan of what this is looking like right now. Even the little things, like I remember, to go back to more feedback real quick. Like there are pits that you can fall down, and I didn't realize that there are safe pits that you can fall down, but they have like a texture over them, kind of like in A Link to the Past. Like you can fall down certain ones, and you're safe when you fall inside them. Otherwise, they're like solid color pits where if you fall down, you get damaged. And like I guess I didn't really realize that because there was a bit of a glare on the screen. But I didn't see that. But
yeah.
Having that kind of visual feedback is always important to the player, back and forth from the game to from the game to the player. So I mean, they're really taking their time to make sure that every little bit of this game is very carefully woven and constructed, and that's very much appreciated. I'm excited to see what the final product will look like.
Same. I think they've got really something special going on here, and I do think the main kind of like, whoa, sticking point for a lot of new players is going to be the difficulty starting off. But once you kind of get over that initial hurdle and you kind of realize what the game expects of you, and you find different ways to kind of mitigate that difficulty, I think there's a really good groove that you get into with the gameplay. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all shakes out in the final product. But it sounds like that's about it on your end, right?
Yep, that's about it.
Cool. Well, that's it for me, too. So thank you all so much for watching. If you like what we do here, please do consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/gvgaming, where you can support us for as little as $1 a month, and that gets you into our Discord community, the best, nicest, most awesome gaming community on the internet, bar none. But even if you can't do that, if you just like and subscribe, every little bit truly does help, and we really love you for it. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Till we meet again.